Welcome everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. As probably not surprisingly, 3 out of 6 webinars this year we are so far devoting to the war in Ukraine and its impact on conflicts in the South Caucasus. The first one about a month ago was focused on the peace building and how the war is reshaping our rethinking about what conflicts are and really how to work with them. The next one, which was scheduled for June 16, will focus on the geopolitical and political changes in the Caucasus, again, as a result of the war in Ukraine. But these two are more in a way on the political, institutional end of the conversation. But the war, of course, has also primarily in the first place, perhaps a massive human toll. Perhaps tens of thousands of people have already died and millions have been displaced from Ukraine, and probably hundreds of thousands or at least tens of thousands also left Russia for many reasons. And this is the angle really we want to focus on today, the lived experiences of war, the human stories of war. Again, where are the people moving? What's the impact on them? What's the impact on the host societies? And we have 3 great panelists. Thank you for joining us today, who all of them lived either in Ukraine or Russia, but currently aren't there. So not everybody left as a result of the war, but they have an experience of living in Russia or Ukraine, and then now being in Armenia, Georgia, and Sweden, 3 countries that are host to many people who are living Ukraine and Russia currently. And again, very different experiences, of course, but among them, yeah, there is a range from social science experience to a researcher to some of our panelists actively work with people who have been living Ukraine or Russia in the past few months. The couple of words about the panelists. Mariam Pesyanidze is a film director currently based in Tbilisi, co-founder of the Reset NGO, and has been engaged with people who've been moving from Russia or Ukraine. Anna Leontieva is based in Yerevan and is a scholar in cultural psychology and public policy, also an activist and counselor for many Russian NGOs. And Sofia Wojtiev, joining us from Stockholm, is a sociologist with a researcher at the Institute for Future Studies, I guess. My co-moderator is Sevil Husseinova, the editor of Caucasus Edition and a researcher at the Center for Independent Studies, Social Studies in Berlin. So that's much for the introductions. Couple of words about the format, quite usual. Yeah, so those who are regulars should know already, but we will start with Sevil moderating about 45-50-minute discussion for the panelists. So that will go until about 7:50 Caucasus time. And from there on, we will turn to question and answer session with the audience. So if you have questions, please post them in the Q&A section. You can see in the bottom of your screen. And we can then I can read your question, or if you would like, after you post your question, also raise your hand and we will invite you to join us either through video or audio and engage with the conversation directly. Yeah, so the raise hand will be the sign that you intend to come in. And I apologize in advance if we end up with more questions than we have time to answer. So we will go in the order they are received, let's say, and if possible, we will group some questions, but we'll try to get to all of you if it's possible. Then we will finish at 8:30 Caucasus time. Thank you. Sevil.
Thank you, Phil, for the introduction, and thank you to all our panelists for joining us today. As Phil already mentioned, you have different experience. You are being in different locations. And my first question is about your activities, your experience working with migrants, displaced people, how the war affected your activities. Maybe a little bit about your experience before the war. And yeah, let's start. And who wants to be first? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, Sophia, yeah, please.
Thank you. I was, yeah. No, as you mentioned, Phil, before, I am a sociologist, and I have been studying especially how the first stage of this war, the start of the conflict, so I mean annexation of Crimea and the insurgency in the eastern part of Ukraine, how these two massive events affected relationships between diasporas of Russians and Ukrainians living in Sweden. So has anything changed in how they perceive each other, and related questions? So for me, studying this topic has been already a big issue, like almost 10 years ago. And when the war, the new phase, right, the invasion started now in February, it became very difficult for me as a Ukrainian person to continue on working on that. It felt, I guess, one of the biggest issues would be, it felt almost unethical to talk to people who are fleeing Ukraine about their experiences. I didn't want to even think about re-traumatizing people and asking, so what do you think about it, right? So I think the first, even now, the biggest question is like the ethics of research when it comes to studying war, and then of course the personal moment when yeah, it was very difficult to do anything else apart from thinking about what is happening to my friends and family. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Yeah, maybe Anna, yeah, can you please share your experience?
Thank you, Sophia, for raising the ethical perspective for the first time. So I have not been closely engaged to working with migrants since the first phase of the war. However, I am mostly plan to present here the experience of Russians who left Russia right after the war started, as I come from Russia myself, and well, I'm ethnically half Armenian, so here in Yerevan, I'm a bit different from the group I present. And well, I want to talk about the push factors for Russians, because there's quite a numerous migration of Russians to Armenia and Georgia. However, before I start, I just wanted to make, well, I don't know, a statement, just mention that being a Russian in 2022 is quite a specific situation emotionally and ethically. And I want to make clear that I kind of have these priorities for Ukrainian experience I consider it much more important. And though we talk today about Ukrainian refugees and Russian migrants, it's important to me to make it clear that, of course, Russian experience is far away from the level of suffering that Ukrainian refugees have. So I moved urgently to Yerevan from Russia, and I know that a lot of Russian civil society activists did the same. We have Russian people here in our apartment every other week, for people who've been fired, for example, for posts in the internet. I personally got a claim from a student for explaining some, well, actually it's quite a nice example, because the claim of my student was on the fact that I made it clear is, well, some students so disturbed that they filed a claim against me in Russia, though, well, it hasn't. I'm not a migrant under pressure. I'm not at risk. However, it reflects the situation with political freedom, academic freedom, and opportunities to work in Russian society these days. Oh, I just learned that my internet connection is poor. My apology, I don't know how to do so. I just wanted to talk about the push factors for a lot of people from Russia, and it is important that Armenia is among the countries that are easily accessible for Russians because they Armenia doesn't require visas. So I'm part of quite a big migration group, and I plan to present this experience today as well. So, well, my experience back in Russia is probably, we'll talk about this in the second part if it will be needed. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Anna. Yeah, maybe when you have this weak internet, maybe you just turn off your video and then we will hear you more better. Okay, so yeah, please, I turn to Maria. Yeah, could you also?
Thank you, Sofia and Anna, for your introduction. As already Phil mentioned, in my usual life, I am film director and eco-activist and also like activist. Past 3 years, I work with migrants, so that's why I turn more deep in the South Caucasus conflicts. And for me, it's very important because like my personal life is like affected by these conflicts very close, because I left Russia in 2014 because of the conflict that started between Russia and Ukraine, and because of annexion of Crimea, because my parents divorced because of that, and because for me it was absolutely terrible situation, because I have a lot of friends in Ukraine and I still can't understand how these things can happen. So of course, when this phase started that we have now, I was absolutely out of my mind. And also past 4 years, I live with my boyfriend is from Ukraine. So that's why it's again, for me, super sensitive, all things that are happening. And in the same time, like I'm from Russia, I was born in Moscow, I'm for a half Georgian. So all these things is for me very, very personal. Yeah, and that's why when all these 6 things started, in the same time, I was like a lot of searching ways how to help my Ukrainian friends, and in the same time, how to help my Russian friends who are like political migrants and who are under the Russian political attack, like pro-Russian political attack all these years, because they are trying to fight against all this stuff.
Mariam, thank you for your thoughts. Could you please elaborate more about the work, your activity in Georgia? Yeah, you are doing, and what are the main challenges people are facing? Yeah, those who flee from the war or from the political pressure and other problems, yeah, from Russia or Ukraine.
I think, unfortunately, one of the main things that you mean Russian citizens, yes? Like
yeah, if you're working with Russians.
So here I can say that unfortunately hatred leads to hatred, and that's why I think all Russian citizens, like most of them, if you will ask how they feel now here, for example, in Georgia, of course, they cannot feel like before. They can like it was before 24 February, because, for example, when someone is asking them like where they are from, they cannot like they can okay, of course, answer, but they are making this, pause because they understand that when they will say that they are from Russia, the people can refuse to talk with them. So of course it's very hard to feel for the let's say, normal people from Russia, but it's like the situation is absolutely understandable. So I think we will have this problem for a long time, a lot of years after. So it will not like just finished tomorrow, you know. And the problems, like they have, of course, like just the banal problems in the city, like with because they cannot take money from their cards, and or they cannot find to rent like the flat or some apartment because they are Russians, because in some cases Georgians can refuse to rent their apartment for Russians. But it's of course not in all cases like this, because also we have situation when, for example, my friend artist Alisa Yofe, she's actually not from like Russia because she was born in Tashkent, but most of her life she was living in Russia, in Moscow, and she has a Russian citizenship. And so she came here to Georgia now during the first days of war, but she like very like not easily maybe, but she started to integrate into Georgian society because she had already friends here, and she found how she can make her art here, and she learns Georgian, so she makes her art in Georgian, Ukrainian, and Russian. And I think it's good way how people, like when people, I'm very, most of times I'm saying to the people that you need to start language and history of the place where you're coming. So it helps to integrate.
Despite the factors you mentioned, yeah, some discontent of Georgians or some xenophobic even attitude towards Russians, despite this fact, Georgia is on the place number one, yeah, among the South Caucasus countries where people are fleeing, and it's still attractive place, yeah, to live. So what do you think, why Georgia is still attractive for Russians despite all these facts?
I think the first reason is because of this is really easy to make, like to create business here, and people are coming here to create bank account, new bank account, and to make, I forgot how it's, individual entrepreneur, yes, in English. So a lot of my friends are making it here. Also, of course, because like most of people, maybe not most of people, but half of people can talk Russian, but I don't love this fact, because of course I am saying to all my friends that please talk to people like in English firstly, and then if you understand that they can speak in Russian, yes, no problem. Of course, it's just the language. But especially now for Georgians, it's very like sensitive, you know, when the people are just like starting to speak Russian with them. So yeah, but I think most of people, yeah, they think we will come to Georgia. It's easy to talk here in Russian. So it's one of more reasons why they come here. I think weather maybe also, but and also this thing that it's more close to Russia, that they can easily go back, and it's not so far. So I think, yeah, that's all.
Okay, thank you, Mariam, and let us maybe turn to Sophia. Yeah, could you please also elaborate on the problems people facing? Yeah, let's say around you or your acquainted or friends or people who are coming to Sweden. What are the main problems people facing?
Yeah, so I will not speak about Russians because I don't really know, and also I feel, as you, Anya, said, that's I think yeah, I will give more voice to to people that I see here coming from Ukraine. So first of all, I mean, we all know that Poland is the first major place where people go to if we're talking about fleeing abroad. And when it comes to Sweden, it's not that many people that have arrived here. So I checked the recent migration numbers, and it's around 35,000 people who have applied for this temporary protection directive program. And 25,000 already received that, I guess, permit, you would call it. And the migration office here prognoses that it will be maybe 80,000 Ukrainian refugees until the end of the year. So if you compare this to numbers that are in Poland, like 3 million, it's quite small. But also Sweden is quite a small country, and every third of Ukrainian refugees who came to Sweden, they stayed in Stockholm. And here it's quite interesting because Sweden has made these historical moves, such as granting Ukraine defensive weapons, but also applying now for NATO membership, and that's a super big deal for Sweden. So the general mood of Swedish, at least political elites across the right-left spectrum, is quite pro-Ukrainian, and the general mood in society is also very pro-Ukrainian. And the state itself is helping quite a lot. So I don't want to be the advertiser of Sweden. Of course, there are their own problems, but there is quite a lot of effort to make it more easier for Ukrainian refugees to understand the system and to apply for this temporary protection directive. That is, this directive makes it quite straightforward in a way for people to be in the EU, find a place to live, but also even work. Yeah, and then on the other hand, we also have quite an active diaspora here. So, for example, every Sunday since the war has begun, there is a huge demonstration in the city center. And you can see like how different it is from how it was in 2014. So Sweden also was officially very pro-Ukrainian and so on, but you would never really see representatives of different political parties at the demonstrations that the diaspora has organized. So, for example, last Sunday, the previous prime minister was actually talking on the demonstration. So it's quite interesting. Then, when it comes to like what are the difficulties? I guess the biggest difficulty is language. So not everyone from Ukraine speaks English. And then I'm even not talking about Swedish, because who would learn Swedish? Yeah, people would learn it, but it's quite a small amount of people who speak it. Yeah, so I would say the difficulties from, and also another thing that is here quite well developed is the help for academic population from Ukraine. So researchers fleeing from Ukraine. The trouble with that is that often, so I have some friends who are still in Ukraine and who want to do research about the war and like how it affects people in different areas of Ukraine. But the grants and help from the EU and Sweden specifically covers only those people who are leaving Ukraine. So quite a lot of academics have applied for this program as well. So it seems like it's quite a lot, but and people are quite active in showing their support, or yeah. That's it. Sorry, it wasn't too much. I know that there are some some smaller issues here and there, but I'm not prepared to make them a big deal yet, because it's not what I know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sophia. And now maybe we'll come back to Anna, and maybe you elaborate about these push factors, yeah, the people made flee from Russian Federation, and maybe you touch upon the policy of the Russian Federation towards those people who have already left or seek to leave the country. What's the attitude towards them? Yeah, are there any obstructions? Are there any problems arrived on the border, or what about this? Yeah, please, Anna.
Sevil, do you mind if I start with sharing some preliminary data that I've learned about Russians in Armenia and Georgia? So there is a group, they call their work After 24th, and they started a preliminary survey for Russians in Armenia and Georgia, and I just wanted to share some information from them. So they say that 2/3 of people come to their host countries for the first time. Definitely, they don't know a lot about the host societies and their history. 80% of people left spontaneously, and they were driven by political position, their unacceptance of war, and with the fear of closed borders, because things in Russia have started very unexpectedly for people. No one actually among Russian citizens, well, I have to make this clear, I'm talking about the second phase. Of course, people in Russia, well, felt fine about Crimea annexion, I have to say it, though it's not true for civil activists, but generally they did. But this new phase and new escalation was unexpected for people. So they were living spontaneously and very much frightened. And most people could choose Armenia and Georgia because of accessibility. As I said, they don't require visas. So people were able to do this spontaneously. And well, among 1/4 of people shared that they had problems on the borders. They were mostly it were problems from Russian side. And I guess and a lot of people were afraid of these problems, but they haven't faced any. So I guess it might be that during these early days of Russian migration due to war, well, Russian society is quite a violent one. The tolerance towards violence is high. So it might be that it was even not a policy, but it was just a situation when some people felt that they can control all these IT people, all these, university professors who spontaneously took their stuff, trying to run and make sure they will save some freedom. So I think that it might be that it is even not the policy itself, but just the climate. And Russian society is also very atomized and divided. So answering the question about the attitude from Russians towards those who left Russia, there are a lot of conflicts, and it's really difficult to find the common ground because there is no political action accessible for Russians right now. So if there would, people meet on their protests, and it's more than 16,000 Russian people detained for anti-war protests. And of course, there is people who live in Russia right now. A lot of them don't support war. However, there is no political action they can have, and the one that might be supported worldwide. And there is a lot of frustration about that, and a lot of aggression coming from the frustration. I'm speaking about people who have information and clear position about the war. And the majority of Russians, I guess it's a majority, indeed feel that, well, Russian regime needs some support. But I think that these people don't actually, they're not much interested in those who leave Russia. So it's kind of Russian civil society is divided by these borders, and it's a challenge to find this common platform for Russians to work together. And right now in Vilnius, there has been a forum of Russian opposition abroad, things like that. And well, Russians in Russia really feel bad about this, and feel so it's a challenge for Russians. And but I want to put an accent to a hosting society, to Armenia, for example. What I think is important is that I just talk about political migrants, but there is a huge group, Maria mentioned them, from Russia. These are economically driven Russian entrepreneurs, and around a half probably of people come from IT and are driven for economic reasons. And they, the average income is higher than the average income of the hosting societies, both Armenia and Georgia. So, well, I guess that they can use all economic instruments to adapt in a new country. For political group of migrants, those who were driven mostly by political reasons, the situation is a bit different. And I would, from what I see, they are really engaged in politics, but they don't have, this channel to, and no information about South Caucasus situation, nor a channel to, well, to start, I don't know, participating with all this political mood they have. Right. One case I wanted to share in Yerevan. What Russian migrants did was this trash collection initiative, something that has been ecological activism is something that has been visible for a while from Russians who came. So, I mean, people are politically active, but probably ecology or things like that are easier for them to express themselves than any political agenda and any political processes in Armenia and probably Georgia as well. And another thing about Russians I want to end with is that less than 20% know exactly that they want to stay in their host countries based on this preliminary data. So only from 5 Russians who right now find themselves in Armenia or Georgia due to war really see themselves there in future. So it's a very unstable situations for the region. I mean, this migration and its role. And one thing that might be different from in Armenia compared to Georgia is, of course, this climate, because, well, Armenia has different relations with Russia. And, well, it's a whole other story, but it is shaped with the fact that Russians don't know, generally, they don't know a lot about what's happening in Armenia, what is its position, situation, resources. And it is interesting, for example, when it comes to militarism, because it's really different. It has different sources in Armenia and Russia. And Russian migrants feel very bad when they face any signs of this, I mean, the political Russian migrants. And I guess that the discussion about all these things, values and politics, it hasn't yet started in Armenia, not at all. And as far as I can see, Ukrainian migration to Armenia is less numerous, though I saw projects who support Ukrainian refugees, but it's mostly, well, services, finding stuff for them and like basic needs meeting. And Russian migration tries to participate in that as well. So in right now in this spring in Yerevan, there have been rallies in support of war, as well as once anti-war rallies that united Ukrainian and Russian diaspora. So the situation here is indeed very unstable and complicated in this regard.
Thank you, Anna. You mentioned this organization, this initiatives, not organization, after 24. I met them just a couple of weeks ago in Tbilisi. I know that there are some self-organized initiatives, among Russians in Yerevan and in Armenia, in Georgia, and this also this activity comes from the fact that lots of them are with academic background or activism background, so they are very well prepared for such activities. But it also comes from the fact that they know very little, as you mentioned, know very little about the region, about the problems in there, and they want to be more active, to get involved in the societies they are living in. And my questions to Mariam, what about some activities among Russian or Ukrainian refugees in Tbilisi, in Georgia? Yeah, what do you think about the activities and how they collaborate between each other?
First of all, I want to mention about my friends. This is the organization Library About Georgia. When the all things started, they were the first who did the project, like kind of memo about the Georgia for the people who arrived from Russia to Georgia. So they tried to somehow be in touch with these people and try to explain them what is happening in Georgia, what the history we have, why for some things for us are very sensitive, for example, Russian language. So yes, I think this is very good project, and I also tried to I helped them to distribute these memos in a couple of places where Russian citizens are gathering sometimes. And about the project that are made also, for example, I think it's important to mention about the Helping to Live organization. I think you know about this organization. In the first days of March, it was created in Tbilisi. So they did a very big work. According to the last data, I think they helped about more than 10,000 Ukrainians to leave the dangerous places in Ukraine, like during the old war. And they are continuing their work. And also we have, for example, the organization that calls Immigration for Action. This is kind of the team of the different guys from Russia mostly. And they are doing lectures, round tables, cinema evenings, and also they are trying to collaborate with local people. For example, I had the meeting with them, and they were asking from me how they can make kind of like Georgian film, like documentary festival, and to show these movies to the people who came here, so they can learn more about Georgia. And also the very interesting place in this case is all the humanitarian centers where the humanitarian aid is collected. We have a couple of them, but the most biggest one is Palyashvili 60. And first 2 weeks I came here and also was like a volunteer there. So it was really, I don't know how to call it correctly, strange and interesting feeling, I think. I got stressed a lot because there was like people from different countries in one time that were helping each other. So from Ukraine, from Russia, from Belarus, from Georgia, and they were working together. I actually, I think I worked about maybe 20 minutes, and then I just had a kind of panic attack, and I cried because I saw a lot of these, little children boots in the box. So I had kind of flashback, I don't know, but flashback. So yeah, and but in the same time, it was I was really happy to see that there people were working together like without these borders, and yeah, it was cool. So yeah, in Tbilisi, I think there are places where people can work together. Of course, it's not always so nice. We also have different situations, but yeah, I'm trying to also fix it somehow when I met the people who don't understand some things.
Thank you, Mariam. You mentioned some initiatives, yeah, who were organized, self-organized in order to help first Ukrainians. And there are lots of transnational groups, initiatives collaborating with each other. In Berlin, for instance, there are lots of Russian-speaking initiatives, groups who are helping to Ukrainians. And my question to Sophia, what can you elaborate on this topic? What is it about how it's happening in Sweden, in Stockholm? Do you know any kind of initiatives who are helping each other, who are collaborating, or is it not a common in Sweden?
I mean, when it comes to Ukraine, so like support to Ukraine, a lot of organizations here that are local, and they I don't even think that they are like registered organizations or something, but let's say groups of people. They are working a lot with Ukrainian local organizations. And I know that when something is needed to Ukraine, to like some specific things, then we get some sort of a list even, and then you try to help a specific organization that is based in Ukraine, but from here. So there is this collaboration. There is a lot collaboration as well. From what I know, it's kind of smaller because we all know that, or at least in the EU, we know that like some countries are more or less difficult in terms of transporting different things, like when it comes for protection, like, I don't know, helmets, you cannot just transport them randomly via post. So I know that a lot of activists here would work a bit together with activists in Poland to figure the logistics out. So I think there's like a lot of activists that are like building some sort of networks across the EU, at least, to help bring the things needed to Ukraine. What is super interesting for me and very impressive is that the needs are updated so fast, right? Like it can be that next day something changes, but the information goes quite quickly, and people are very like, it's kind of like whoop, and everyone got together to help with a specific need. And I think like when it comes to organizational activism in general, this is how things work the best, when you have a very specific practical thing. When it comes to like local organizations that would help refugees in Sweden or refugees in other EU countries, then it's very similar. So like usually it's organized by some sort of diasporic-ish organization. So I don't know even if you can call them diaspora, but like people, let's say like me or whatever, that have been in Sweden before. And then you have like a collection site where you ask people to bring things, and then you see, okay, we have too much clothes, don't bring clothes. So everyone knows in the end, and it's I guess like the age of technology makes it so much easier to spread all the information very fast. So, and I think like the good thing is that there is also a lot of help from like local, I don't know, it's not like not the city power, but like more neighborhoods, for example, that have their own little local administration or whatever. So you could have like a lot of charity flea markets and things like that, and money would be all transported to an organization that works with the help to Ukraine. I know that there is quite a big push from a lot of Ukrainians to donate to local Ukrainian organizations instead of these big international organizations like Red Cross or I think it's called SOS and things like that. So there is a bit of a push of like anti-mega big organizations, perhaps for good reasons. Yes, and then a friend of mine also works a bit in Poland with the refugees. She's also a refugee, and what she does is that when the new refugees come in, those who were there before are already organized to help. So you get also this collaboration between people who are just, we were here a week before, we know a bit more, we will help you figure these things out. So there's a lot of collaborations across and within countries. Thank you.
Yeah, Sophia, as you mentioned, yeah, there were lots of acts of solidarity among people, among Europeans, and we are running out of time. And my last question to all of you, and it's also related to this topic you already mentioned. While we have, we probably can have some representatives of international organizations or donors among our audience today. My question is, what do you think? What kind of support do local organizations and activists need on the ground? Yeah, from local authorities or international communities, donors. What do you think about this? And this question to all of you as a last question to all panelists. Yeah, who wants to start, or maybe Sophia? Mm-hmm.
So again, I am not working with these organizations, so I feel maybe it's not my place to talk from them. But one thing that I know from being a critical sociologist is that it's important to listen to people on the ground. So find the organizations that are already there, try to see what are their needs, and then, build on top of that. It usually happens that we have big organizations that are deciding that, yeah, this is the country in the world, then we probably need this, that. But maybe giving money to the local organizations is actually something that is very, very important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sophia, for your output. And yeah, please, maybe Mariam.
I think like it depends on the activity of organization, because like, for example, I didn't mention the Nino Katamadze font, forgot the word, how font, yeah, like font of Nino Katamadze. They are helping the Ukrainians that already came in Georgia, and for example, they need very like they have, for example, they need people who can work with kids or can make some sport activities with someone. So it can be not always only money, of course. Money is important, but I agree with Sophia. It's like better to find local, maybe like not local organization, maybe concrete person that you can help. For example, my other friend who has, he's Russian, but he lives in Georgia about 3 or 4 years, very good person who has a little book magazine in Tbilisi. From the first days, he's collecting humanitarian aid for humanitarian centers in Tbilisi that are collecting this help for Ukrainians. And also he collects money, but he sends it to concrete person, like for example, from Mariupol or Bucha, like he's finding these concrete people who need help or need bus or need food or something. So I think it's also a good way to somehow to see what you are doing, not to abstractly send somewhere money in the big, like some organization.
Thank you. Mariam, and please, Anna, the floor is yours. And
yeah, so I'm thinking, indeed, me myself, I'm not in a position to talk about Ukrainian refugees' help, which I guess is probably the same. However, what I think is that in Armenia it might be a bit different. The context is a bit different because Armenia has Syrian migrants as well, Artsakh migrants, Nagorno-Karabakh migrants as well. So it's interesting that in Armenia there are a lot of multicultural refugees these days, and what I think is that it raises questions about accessibility of funds. Well, not only based on the agenda that is now. Well, I'm sorry, I don't want to sound as if Ukrainian help is not a priority right now, but I know, and I want to kind of talk about some of Armenian NGO leaders who felt very differently, very mixed feelings when it was this moment of escalation in on the border, let us tell, in Baruch, in Nagorno-Karabakh escalation moment. And at that moment, I know that some NGO leaders in Armenia told that, I stopped helping Russians. I want to help Artsakh people right now. So this is a kind of a very bad competition between refugees that is here in Armenia. They don't talk about this much, but sometimes people feel this way, that simultaneously a lot of challenges happened for NGOs. So I guess that I definitely agree with Sofia's point on listening to NGOs, local NGOs, and sometimes they would talk with big NGOs about the agenda that is solid right now, but probably the flexibility that ground root organizations have might help them also to work in this difficult context where people, right now in Yerevan, still people from Syria, a lot of them, and they're in very different economic positions compared to, for example, Russians who are not refugees at all, and etc. Yeah, so there are some points specific for Russians, but I don't think they're important right now. I just wanted to say that, it's very multidimensional situation with for hosting societies right now. And I think it would be great to use the flexibility of grassroots in these days.
Thank you, Anna. And you touch upon a topic which is also very, let's say, discussive right now in Europe, about other groups of migrants who now get less attention, or they have been treated another way comparing with Ukrainians. So there are lots of discussions about this topic. And now I'm turning to Phil, and we have our Q&A session. And thank you again for joining us today for interesting discussion. And Phil, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sevil. And this is another call to the audience. If you would like to engage, either you have a question or a comment, please raise your hand so we'll let you in. or if you would like to simply type it so I can read it, that's also welcome. So now is the time. And before, as we are waiting for that, I want to thank everybody, all the panelists, for really engaging with a very difficult really discussion and doing it quite well in a nuanced way. So of course, thank you for first separating, right? So yes, we have migrants from Russia and displaced people from Ukraine. They're two very different situations. And then within each community, you also have a lot of differences from economic to political migrants among Russians, for example. And also, I think an important point you all raised in the end about essentially Ukraine is fresh, unfortunately now, and then down the road, other crises might start also crowding. Let's say the space is extremely important, of course, not to forget, right? So there's a million people who left Ukraine just because some other crisis becomes more popular on TV, let's say, 2-3 months down the road. But then if you look in the opposite direction, essentially, like Syria and the consequences of that war and Karabakh war and many others are still with us, and also not to forget that. That does put a lot of pressure on civil societies and ourselves as representatives of it, knowing that, yes, it's very compelling in a way to run with the day. And yes, we should absolutely work with every crisis that comes up and do the best we can, but hopefully without forgetting the previous ones, as long as they are still ongoing. So thank you for all that. So far we have one question, and that's I think to Anna, but maybe others also can come in if you have other examples. And specifically, it's about, tell a bit more about particular initiatives. So as I understand, self-organized initiatives. One, I think you mentioned, this is a question from the audience, about After 24 initiative. Did we get the title right?
Yeah, this initiative is a research initiative, and researchers, well, I just wanted to mention that in Armenia there is a bunch of meetings, events for researchers, university people, and activists as well. So we have very huge networking here. So I just met people who make this research. I personally want to thank Gleb Stukalin for providing me with some data. So this is one of the research initiatives. I know another one that is a joint effort of Russian and Ukrainian sociologists in Telegram. I know it from Trilena Koneva. So there are a couple of researchers who started a survey, some preliminary data gathering in this way. That's something, well, what I know about right now. And the data in Russia is very questionable regarding the war. It's a huge discussion about whether public polls about war support in Russia can be reliable in any way, and if it's even possible to do research in Russia these days, and it's kind of social research, except for case studies, I don't know. So here, well, it's a huge other topic. What do we know about Russian society right now?
If we expand this question, we got a second question, which you already answered, so probably the audience member joined a bit late, was about the attitude towards Russians who are migrating into Georgia. I know Mari covered that quite well earlier, but maybe we can extrapolate this question into a bigger one. Maybe let me ask this also to Sofia and Mari, if possible. How do you see a role of Russians, specifically Russians who are, of course, anti-war and we have left the country for political reasons, assuming in Russia it's very difficult to work. So how do you see a role for them in helping us move forward in some form? If yes, how do you see that role? And that's a bit maybe, question to you personally, if possible. So one question is essentially the attitude of host societies towards Russian migrants, right? But a kind of second part, do you see a role for them? If yes, how?
Need I start?
Sure.
From the question in the, yes, about Russians in Georgia?
Sure.
Okay. So, yeah, I think like it's a little bit this situation changed, because in the first days there were a lot of aggression that was really terrible. Like, for example, in the first days, someone threw a stone in a girl because she spoke Russian. Or, for example, I heard the story how some guy made a hate speech towards Russian-speaking children, but they were from Kazakhstan. And also, like, you know, there was like, yeah, a lot of situations also with Ukrainians, because like, of course, Ukrainians like also like speak Russian, like depends where they are, what the part Ukraine they are from. So me personally, I had this situation with my friend from Ukraine. We were like taking money from обменник, I forget how exchange this is place, and I was translating her speech to the guy, and he thought that she is Russian, but she was not, and like so it's like mind-blowing, to be honest. And now, like, I think it's of course, like the people who really hate Russians, I think they still hate Russians, but Georgians are very emotional people. So first month they were like more emotional, and now it's like they a little bit, like, I think maybe got more calm, let's say. I don't know how to formulate it better. But still, yes, when, I don't know, like, for example, my Russian friend asks me to maybe give him a contact of, I don't know, theater or maybe some artistic person, like to work with him, and he is Georgian. For me, it's important to understand like in what rhetorics he thinks, how he thinks, is he okay, if he is okay, how to formulate it for my Georgian friend that they can work. And like, so it's like a lot of information that I need to say before to make them friends, let's say. So yeah, it's still hard, but a little bit easier than in first months.
Sophia?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question. And to be honest, it's very difficult for me to separate me being Ukrainian and me being a researcher in terms of peace and conflict and stuff. One thing that I noticed that people do, at least like Russian people do in Stockholm at the demonstrations, if they want to, because these demonstrations are usually organized by, you know, Ukrainians. So what I saw a lot of people do is either like joining in with a Russian flag, but then it would like say, stop Putin's war, or I'm embarrassed to be Russian. And then it's kind of, you know, they are there, at least. I don't know how it's accepted or not, but they're there. Or now I saw a new thing. As I understand it, it's a flag that has been used in Russia for protests against the war. So without the red line or the red part. So there are quite a few. So last time I was at the demonstration a week ago, there were like 3 flags like that. So I think that Russians are joining in solidarity with Ukraine. They have, I guess that's all I can say. I don't know if what it will lead to or how it will be, but they are there and they are supporting, and nobody is you know, confronting them, or I don't know. So I think that's a step.
Thank you. Anna?
I want to comment on Miriam's point. Based on the data that I was shared with, people actually, Russian people don't report a lot of discrimination, neither in Armenia nor in Georgia. So people who would claim that they feel that host society is hostile is like less than 5% from the so far. So it might be that I don't know, the everyday experience is much less probably emotionally shaped, framed, I don't know, as the media right now. And part of it is, again, that Russian people are very emotional in media because they're not left with a lot of political instruments. I want to say it again. So media is indeed very emotional, but well, just I'm not sure if this data is, challenging what Mariam says about Georgian attitude in Georgian society, but well, it might be that it's not so bad. So that things might be better for Russians than it seems based on this.
And now, while you're at this, we got a follow-up question for you. You mentioned quite a bit of data, and I know you had a slide which we asked not to post, but there is a question about, there is a question about where the data comes from and if it's publicly available, the ones you shared.
Yeah. Unfortunately, not yet. So I'm here using my privileges of getting in touch with all these researchers who are now in Armenia. So as I said, I can put in chat probably, or just if you Google after24.org, this would be the group of sociologists, multidisciplinary group. I guess they're going to, I mean, as far as I know, they completed the data collection. So I guess it would be publicly available very soon. Yeah. So again, there is a couple of I don't know, pieces, op-eds based on this data from the authors, from Gleb. So I don't know if our audience sees the chat if I use it. Can I?
Yeah, if you post it to everyone, then it will be...
Yeah, I will. Thank you. So yes, I'm very grateful for Gleb for sharing it with me again.
And thank you for sharing what's available. And hopefully, as it becomes public, if you don't mind sharing with us, we will also post, so then people can, the audience in the Caucasus can also see. Thank you. Follow-up question. It's again, since we are on the topic of initiatives, so a lot of initiatives seem to be done by Russian, actually, migrants. The Ukrainians, so far, we are seeing primarily are focused on humanitarian help for other Ukrainians who came later. At least that's what also Sophia was talking about. There is a question from the audience about, and it's more civic initiatives in any format, organized by Ukrainians. Are you aware of them in either Armenia, Georgia, or Europe? By the way, it's civil, if you wouldn't mind, maybe also in Berlin, because Berlin also has quite a bit. It's also a big center where people migrate. So yeah, any initiatives by Ukrainians, either how can potentially people engage with them or support them? Are you aware of them?
Actually, you are right. Berlin is a center of very active Ukrainian people, activists. And of course, they were one of the first who reacted. And now they're very active, and even I know some Russian-speaking organizations who are cooperating with them. So they are, at least we don't know any clashes or any confrontations between these activists. And this is a very good point. And another experience I faced in Poland, as you know, Poland is now very active, in terms of working with refugees, with displaced people, and they have lots of NGOs. And what is very important, that they get a huge support from local authorities, which wasn't the case during the first wave of migrants, back in 2015, 2016. This is a turn. They are explaining as a very good point, very good sign from local authorities to help NGOs and activists working on migration issue, which is a very very new for Polish activists. And what they mentioned, and they expressed that thanks to Ukrainians who used to live in Poland, the help and this activity were very quick, very fast, and very informative, very direct, because of those Ukrainians who are living in Poland. And lots of volunteers are Ukrainians themselves helping now Ukrainians in Poland. this is a very interesting point I faced while being in Poland.
Thank you. Others to know anything or would like to add or share about Ukrainian-led initiatives?
I can very shortly add about Georgia that I personally know like people, like for example, who like from, let's say, Ukrainian diaspora in Georgia, who of course from the first day started to help and to do a lot of stuff. For example, one guy started to organize the places, apartments for Ukrainians who are coming to Georgia, and he's like the main hub, and he's Ukrainian, and he's helping the all Ukrainians who come here. Another guy who has the radio cafe, maybe you know, it's also in Ukraine. They have this radio cafe, and we have it in Tbilisi. I know him, and he also organized at his place like this humanitarian aid center. Also this Nino Katamadze organization, they involve Ukrainians in like helping Ukrainians. So yeah, I think we also have like both, like all the nations who are like involved in these activities.
Mm-hmm.
Anna?
Yeah, quick note, I realized I want to share it as well, is that among Russian migrants, there are ethnic Ukrainians as well. So I speak with people who are Russian migrants, they are not refugees, and they are Ukrainian and feel very strongly about everything that happens. So, I mean, probably that's the answer why a lot of initiatives here in Armenia are kind of mixed between Russians and Ukrainians. But it's actually a whole other topic, a case of being a Russian Ukrainian these days. And I know that there are some Russian initiatives in Russia led by people of different ethnicities, migration or refugees who choose Russia as their destination. But there is a group of people whose relatives or some resources are placed in Russia, so they come to Russia. And it's, I mean, I guess it's very small compared to the world support for Russia, for Ukrainian migrants, but still there is this situation of ethnic Ukrainians who are Russian citizens and still assist in some way for current refugees as well.
Thank you. There was a question about safety, which again, safety of the migrants, and again, you covered it to a little bit, but I want to expand this question because we talked about the initial reaction. Yeah, so when the war just started, more the emotional reaction, a lot of people supported, others were more hostile. Specifically, we talked about Russians moving to Georgia. Armenians had quite a mixed reaction to the Ukrainians initially. So that was first reaction in a way. Then it sounds like from what I hear, things settled a little bit and people are more used to seeing migrants and refugees. But let's, if possible, it's too early probably, but talk about longer term situation here. Because as we see, for example, in Armenia and Georgia, we can see a big major rise of prices for housing, for everything essentially, like, simply food, because a lot of the, people came in, especially Russians in this case, who are economic migrants who come in with much higher salaries and are able to pay more. And this does drive the prices up. And that might not be necessarily immediately reversible. So that's one potential impact on the societies that we see that might last, right? And that makes the local population essentially feel economic consequences. But this is one, there can be many others. Overall, we've seen in many previous cases that the refugees in the longer term start facing discrimination and overall impacting the host societies differently. So again, might be too early, but any signs of any of that, and how do you see the situation developing? Do you think it's temporary and most people will leave, as Anna was mentioning earlier? Or do you think people are starting to integrate? Essentially, what can we do we as civil society thinking in a longer term for preventing any kind of conflicts between the local populations and immigrants and refugees? Any thoughts? Sophia?
I can try to say my very, very preliminary guess is that and like it's mostly based on what my mom says. So she still lives with this idea that next month it will be over. And I think a big chunk of people believe that that the war will be over. Like in the beginning, I remember everyone was saying, yeah, it will be over by June. No, it will be over by September. So I think like this first year, both the refugees and the host societies think about it as a temporary thing. That's why I'm guessing there is not much discussion on long-term effects of this large-scale migration and refugee movements around Europe, at least. So it still feels like even like the scheme that refugees are in the EU, it is called temporary protection. So, and it is valid until at least in Sweden, it's going to be valid. First round is until next year's March, but then it's top 3 years. So I think like it's in people's heads still that this is a very temporary thing, but it will end soon. So why even discuss the long-term thing? That's my guess.
Yeah, thank you. And unfortunately, knowing probably coming from Caucasus and having seen the conflicts develop, once they start, they don't, I mean, hopefully they're right in terms of the immediate violent phase of conflict being over maybe tomorrow as soon as possible. But even if it were to end tomorrow, the destruction that's already done, the damage to the relationships that's been done, the war crimes that have been committed, the displacement that happened, and simply cities not existing anymore. It's like unfortunately, we can say that it's not going back to normal, and the consequences of this war, again, even if it were to end tomorrow, will be with us for decades, but at least for years to come. And again, there's as important, absolutely important it is, of course, to support everybody who is currently fleeing and needs support. We should also start thinking about longer term consequences and hopefully, yeah, to the post-war phase, and yeah, both in terms of support for those who flee and not to forget about them, as potentially Syrians are now forgotten, right? But also thinking about the peace movement or everything from reconciliation to holding people accountable, and how does that look like, right? Not to cause further damage. And on that one topic, if question maybe to ourselves, as in specifically part of the civil society that is focused on peace building, which is a very hard topic to discuss during an active war, of course. And yet, right? So we need to be able to hopefully move to a place where we don't face this violence. How do you see peace building moving forward in ethical sense, right? So it is actually supportive of, does differentiate between perpetrator and victim, but at the same time also tries to help us move to a place where all of this is in some form solvable. Any thoughts on, again, to us as a peace building NGO and to others who are trying to be helpful in the direction of building towards eventual peace? Easy question. Huh? All right, so I guess no answers on the peace question. We'll continue thinking.
Maybe,
No, yeah, I just wanted to share a feeling right now that from Russian side, it's such a despair and helplessness from Russian civil society. I just wanted to voice it down because we blame ourselves for everything that happens, how it came so far and so horribly. And I don't know, we blame ourselves very much. However, it's the despair of helplessness. And I don't know, I'm thinking in the direction of political institutions, of some kind of representations for those who don't want war and things like that. But indeed, this is a very challenging situation. Yeah, so I just wanted to voice some emotion as a
Thank you.
to stop this process.
Thank you. Very much understandable. Yeah. Sophia?
Well, I mostly felt awkward that we are all quiet, but I think it's such an important question, but it's really, really difficult to answer. And I think the danger now is that we see, or at least like I read in a lot of Western media, all these suggestions on what Ukraine should do for there to be peace. And then I think somebody wrote something on Twitter. I don't remember who it was, but they were like, why do we always ask what Ukraine should do? So I think like there should be a conversation first. There should be, of course, stop the bombing before we can even think about next steps, I think.
Certainly, thank you. For that, appreciate it. That's definitely not an easy question. And again, yet having come from a region that has been for now 30 years in war or in some form of a conflict, very important to start, I believe, thinking about it, at least some of us thinking about it, moving forward, because the consequences don't go away on their own, right? So the end of hostilities is extremely important, absolutely a priority. Don't on their own necessarily lead to peace, right? So as we see, we can then go from cycle of violence to cycle of violence. Essentially, we don't actively think and move forward with some form of different agenda. And that's where I think is extremely important, the role of Russians, anti-war Russians, right? So who potentially, hopefully can help us move towards a Russia that is not dangerous, essentially, to its neighbors. And that will probably require also support from the rest of us in the neighborhood, including eventually Ukrainians, although it's completely understandable, the current sentiment, and right now the priority being somewhere absolutely else. So that we, I think, don't have any more questions. Thank you for really engaging with this difficult topic, and thank you for taking the time and agreeing to be here. Is there anything anybody would like to add? No? Then thank you, and thank you for the audience for staying with us. We will post this publicly soon and also have a write-up. And again, the next webinar more on the political impact of the war in Ukraine on the conflicts in the South Caucasus. We'll follow up with that on June 16th. The announcement will come soon. Thanks again.